I was just thinking about how usually when we talk about a map, there is this expectation of absolute authority.
Right. Yeah. Like it is an undeniable fact.
Exactly. It is like engineering, you
Yeah.
know? You look at a map of a city on your phone and you see that solid blue line representing a street and you just trust it is there. You do not question it.
No, you definitely do not. You just follow the line.
Right. You just turn the steering wheel.
It is a comforting binary, I mean. It is either officially recognized terrain
Mm.
or it is simply nowhere.
Yeah.
We really like reality to be cataloged.
Oh, for sure.
We desperately want things to be visible and categorized by some central authority before we, step foot on them.
But then you drive into a new subdivision that is not on the satellite view yet.
Yeah.
Or you hit an unmapped road and suddenly there's just sheer panic.
Oh, absolutely. We panic when we hit an unmapped road.
Yeah.
But today, well, we are looking at a stack of research that suggests the human brain actually thrives off the map.
Wait, thrives off the map?
Yeah, like relying too much on the official map is actually making us lazy. We are pulling from an essay titled Language.pdf, The Tyranny of the Dictionary, and then excerpts from a deeply philosophical text called Concept-T.pdf.
Okay, and there's a third one too, right?
Yes, a massive structural manifesto on human consciousness called The Architect of Your Own Meaning.
Wow, okay. And the sheer volume of insight in these sources is just staggering, especially for you listening to this deep dive right now.
It really is. They might seem disparate, like an essay on linguistics, a piece on conceptual architecture, and a manifesto on consciousness.
But they all point to the exact same hidden architecture of how we as humans navigate reality.
Or, I guess more accurately, how we refuse to navigate it.
Right, how we hide. So there is a concept in the architect text that really sets the stage for all of this. It deals with where we aim our efforts. It asks us to look at the target of our actions.
And not like a rigid goal, but the directional pull that gives meaning to what we do.
Exactly. So if we apply that to the first source, language.pdf, we have to ask a pretty fundamental question. What is the actual target of language? Like, what is the goal of opening our mouths and making sounds?
The text is incredibly clear about this, and it strips away a lot of our pretensions, honestly. The ultimate target of language isn't grammatical perfection.
Right.
It isn't lexical obedience to a massive book published by a committee in Oxford or Merriam-Webster. The target is the transfer of structure from one mind to another, period. It is connection.
So it is just me having an idea, like a literal shape or pressure in my head, and using vibrations in the air or symbols on a screen to recreate that exact shape in your head.
That is the only metric of success that actually matters. If that transfer occurs, well, the target's been hit.
Makes total sense.
Language is not, as the source puts it, first a museum of approved units. A museum implies dead things pinned to a board.
Like butterflies under glass.
Exactly. Language is a living, breathing system of patterned attempts to make that transfer.
Yeah.
But we constantly lose sight of that target and obsess over the museum inventory instead.
The source gives this perfectly awkward example that I really want to dig into. The coined word hominismistic.
Oh, yeah. That is a great one.
Let's say someone writes hominismistic in a sentence. Now, you and I both know that is not in the dictionary. It is a completely fabricated string of syllables.
Right. It is totally made up.
And the text points out that the immediate response from a reader isn't to look at the context or to infer the meaning or to ask if the actual transfer of thought happened.
No, not at all. The immediate response is a procedural rejection.
That is not a word.
Yes. We perform what the author brilliantly calls a ritual of disqualification. We slam the door.
We just shut it down.
We treat lexicographic approval as if it creates the legitimacy of the thought, when in reality, the meaning might have already been successfully delivered.
Wait, hold on, though. Let me push back on this a little bit, because I know if I am listening to this in my car right now, I am thinking, well, don't we need the dictionary as a baseline rulebook?
It is a fair question.
Right, because if we completely abandon the dictionary, aren't we just inviting chaos? Like if I walk into a coffee shop and ask the barista for a flurgle, nobody knows what I want.
Yeah, you are just making noise.
Exactly. I'm just making noise. We need some standardization or we can't function.
It is a completely valid point, and the text isn't arguing for linguistic anarchy. The argument isn't that standards are useless, or that every invented term or random string of syllables deserves a standing ovation.
Okay, good. Because flirtle is not a thing.
Right. If you ask for a flurgle without any context, your target wasn't hit. The communication failed. It was clumsy and opaque.
Right.
But the crucial distinction the text makes, and this is really vital for you to grasp, is that unfamiliarity is not the same thing as failure.
Okay, unpack that for me. Unfamiliarity is not failure.
Think about how a living language actually operates on the ground. It bends. Morphology, analogy, tone, they shift constantly. Look at how slang appears on the internet and propagates in days.
Oh yeah, it is instant now.
Or look at how quantum physicists have to repurpose old words to describe phenomena that literally didn't exist in human consciousness a century ago.
Right, like they run out of words.
Exactly. And look at children. A child will invent a word because the standard vocabulary they have been taught is too blunt, too clumsy for their immediate visceral experience.
Like a kid calling a sparkling water spicy water.
Yes, perfect example.
It is not technically correct, but the structure transferred perfectly. I know exactly what they mean when they say spicy water.
Beautiful example. The target is hit if the underlying human capacity for meaning is engaged. And that engagement happens long before any record keeper in a tweed jacket bestows ceremonial legitimacy on the phrase.
So the dictionary comes later.
Always. The dictionary is a map of stabilized practice. It describes what has survived the evolutionary linguistic battle.
Oh, I like that.
It records what people have done after the fact.
Yeah.
It does not generate the life force of the language itself.
So when we scream, that is not a word. We are basically yelling at the terrain for not matching the map.
Yes. The fact that a form is missing from the map does not prove that nothing was present in the terrain.
But if I hit the target of connection, if I say spicy water, or if I use a coined word like homin is mystic in a sentence, and you fundamentally know what I mean, why do people still get so mad?
It is a strong reaction for sure.
Why the ritual of disqualification, the architect text seems to suggest it, is because we are obsessing over the individual word instead of looking at the entire ecosystem of the situation.
Yes, the text demands that we look at a situation totally. It introduces a concept called dimensional homonymy, which is the ability to see the full dimensional richness of a moment or an object rather than collapsing it into a single flat judgment.
Dimensional hominy. Okay, give me a tangible example of that outside of language first, just so I can wrap my head around it.
Think about the smartphone in your pocket right now.
Yep.
If I ask you what it is, you might say, well, it is a phone. But if you just call it a phone and stop thinking, you collapse the reality of the object.
Because it does way more than make calls.
Exactly. It has immense dimensional richness. It is a high-resolution camera. It is a GPS satellite receiver. It is a flashlight.
It is a deeply personal archive of your memories.
And for many people, it is a primary source of anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
So it occupies multiple dimensions simultaneously. If you treat it only as a device for making voice calls, you fundamentally misunderstand its reality.
Okay, I see. So applying that to language, dimensional homonymy means that a word's meaning doesn't rely on it just sitting there in isolation, like floating in a white void.
Right, meaning relies on a total cooperation of systems. When you encounter a sentence, you aren't just looking at the individual words like isolated beads on a string. You are encountering an entire ecosystem.
And language.pdf lists these systems out, right?
Yep.
Syntax, context, analogy, and discourse history.
Let's do a live example to test this. Let's go back to homin is mystic.
Okay, let's say I read an op-ed and the writer says, the dictator's hoministic policies crushed all domestic dissent and isolated the nation.
Perfect.
The text argues that context actually educates the unfamiliar.
So let's break down how your brain instantly processes that ecosystem. First, syntax. Syntax orders relation. Even without knowing the word, your brain maps the grammar.
Right. Hoministic is sitting right before policies.
Exactly. And it ends in IC. Your brain instantly knows this is an adjective. It is a modifier describing the policies. You've already narrowed the universe of possibilities.
Then context. I mean, I am reading about dictators crushing dissent, isolating a nation.
Context narrows possibility even further. Even this word has a negative valence. It is related to authoritarianism, uniformity, perhaps making everyone the same.
Which brings in the third system, analogy.
Yes. Your brain recruits known patterns to illuminate novel ones. You hear homo or homin, and you think of homogeneous, homogenized, same, identical.
And finally, discourse history. I know I am reading a political op-ed, not a fantasy novel or recipe.
Put it all together. Through syntax, context, analogy, and discourse history, the sentence itself is teaching you the word in real time.
Wow.
This is what the source calls the inferential reality of an expression. Human beings are inferential creatures long before we are obedient ones. We learn by patterning, approximating, and revising.
So if the structure around an unfamiliar word makes its intended role legible, then legibility has already happened.
The meaning has arrived.
It didn't need permission.
Meaning is not born when it is approved. It is born when it arrives.
Okay, that is powerful.
So to invalidate that entire sentence about the dictator, just because hominis mystic isn't in your desk dictionary, is an interpretive collapse.
You are taking this rich, multi-layered architecture of human intention, this massive inferential machine your brain just successfully ran, and you are reducing it to mere procedural policing.
You are basically a traffic cop handing out a citation because the car doesn't have the right bumper sticker, ignoring the fact that the car successfully made the journey.
You are abandoning the burden of actually understanding the thought and just asking to see their papers.
It is formal policing replacing actual understanding.
But this brings up a really uncomfortable realization. If all these contextual clues are present, if our brains are literally designed as these massive inferential engines that did figure out hominis mystic from context, then dismissing the word isn't really about a lack of understanding at all.
Yeah.
It is a choice.
It is a deliberate choice. And this requires us to bring in a deep level of radical self-honesty, which the architect text refers to as truth.
Truth, capital T.
Right. Truth isn't just about facts. It is about fidelity to reality as it actually is, not what we pretend it to be to save face. It demands that we look at our own reactions with brutal clarity and stop lying to ourselves about our defense mechanisms.
The architect text uses this analogy for this kind of self-honesty that I absolutely love. It is the wise parent test.
Oh, this is a great one.
Think of a 9-year-old kid who doesn't want to go to school because they have a math test. They come downstairs, they do the whole theatrical, weak little hack. They hold their stomach. Oh, Mom, I'm so sick.
We all did it.
We all did it. Now, the wise parent doesn't scream at them. The parent doesn't bring out medical textbooks to prove they aren't sick.
Right.
The parent just looks at them gently but firmly and says, "Come on, you know what you are doing. Put your shoes on."
The parent knows exactly what is really happening.
The cough is a fiction to avoid a burden.
And radical self-honesty requires us to become that wise parent to our own minds.
So when I am reading that op-ed or listening to someone speak and I encounter that coined word, and my immediate reaction is to roll my eyes, close the laptop, and say, that is not a word I have to apply the wise parent test to myself.
You have to ask yourself, are you actually confused? Is your incredibly powerful inferential brain genuinely stunk by the context?
Probably not.
Or are you faking a linguistic cough
Mhm.
to get out of doing the cognitive work?
That is painfully accurate, because 9 times out of 10, I know exactly what they meant. I am just annoyed.
The language.pdf source explicitly states that the phrase that is not a word is rarely a statement of genuine confusion.
It almost always conceals a much deeper, lazier claim.
And that hidden claim is, because I do not recognize the unit, I am exempt from interpreting the sentence.
I am exempt. I have found a loophole.
It is an escape hatch.
Yeah.
Inference takes caloric energy. Meeting a novel, complex thought halfway requires effort.
It does.
When you choose to reject an idea based on a lexical technicality, you are choosing intellectual laziness.
Wow.
You are choosing lexical obedience over the effort of disciplined inference. You are deciding that you would rather be technically right about a dictionary entry than successfully connect with another human being's emerging thought.
That is a staggering level of self-deception we engage in every day. I mean, we go on Twitter or we sit in meetings and we correct people's grammar or dismiss their phrasing, and we pretend we are noble defenders of the purity of the English language.
But really, we just don't want to expend the energy to understand them.
We are faking a cough.
And once we admit that to ourselves, once we admit that we can infer meaning and that we are just choosing not to, we have to fundamentally change how we view the labels, the words, and the concepts themselves. We have to change our relationship to naming things entirely.
Which the architect text talks about as the concept of noun ships. Now, I will admit, when I first read the section on noun ships, my brain completely stalled out.
This is a strange term.
It sounded like grammatical sailing vessels or something. Walk me through this, because once it clicks, it changes everything.
It is a shift from permanent identity to temporary utility. We usually treat noun labels as permanent prisons.
Okay, give me an example.
If I fail at a task and I say I'm a failure, I have used a noun to lock my entire identity into a concrete block. I have equated the essence of who I am with a single static label.
Right, or if someone gets a job, they say, I am a manager. Like, it is etched into their DNA.
But noun ships teach us that labels are temporary modes. They are contextual states of being. The essence of a thing is separated from its transient roles.
Ah, okay.
You shouldn't say I'm a failure. You should say I am currently occupying failure mode regarding this specific project.
So a person isn't permanently a baseball player. That implies they are a baseball player when they're sleeping or when they're grocery shopping.
Right, they aren't fielding ground balls in the produce aisle.
No, they enter baseball player mode when they step onto the diamond and pick up a glove. It is a provisional state.
Exactly. Now apply this to language in the excerpt we have from concept8.pdf.
Okay.
A coined word, or frankly any word in the dictionary, is a provisional architecture. It is just a temporary mode. It is a compression device trying to bring a bunch of related pressures and ideas into a single unit so that human thought can move faster.
A word is a container we build for a specific moment.
Yes. It may be rough, as the text notes. A coined word might be jagged and imperfect, but roughness is not emptiness. It still carries weight.
And this is where concept.pdf drops the absolute hammer with what it calls the meteor test. This is easily one of my favorite analogies in the entire stack of sources.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so imagine a massive meteor is hurtling through space on a direct collision course with Earth. It enters the atmosphere, it is glowing red hot, it is about to strike the surface.
Terrifying.
That meteor does not care about the human concept of the economy. It doesn't pause to check if the Dow Jones is up.
No, it does not.
It doesn't care about national borders. It doesn't care if it is landing on a prestigious Ivy League university or an abandoned landfill. It doesn't care about our reputations or our titles.
The physical universe does not honor our conceptual rankings. Gravity does not pause for branding.
Right. The meteor only responds to mass, contact, and placement. It exists entirely in the field of physics. Our concepts are invisible to it.
And similarly, the physical, biological reality of communication. The act of a sentence transferring an electrical and chemical idea from the neurons in my brain into the neurons in your brain, that physical transfer does not care if a lexicographic committee has granted a specific word an official title.
The transfer happens regardless of the official label.
This highlights what concept.pdf calls the architecture of false sovereignty.
False sovereignty. That implies we treat things as kings when they're actually just tools.
Perfectly said. We have a strange, deeply ingrained human tendency to revere conceptual structures like the dictionary or the economy or the stock market or even corporate hierarchy as though they possessed independent magical force.
As though they were real things floating in the sky governing us.
We forget that their power is always, 100% of the time, borrowed from human implementation. Words do not have independent agency. They cannot do anything on their own. They require carriers. They require enactment.
They need us to breathe life into them. A dictionary on a shelf in an empty room exerts zero force on the universe.
When we treat a dictionary's approval as what the text calls a stamp of metaphysical permission, when we act like a thought isn't allowed to exist unless it is in the book, we are giving words false sovereignty.
We forget the profound difference between symbolic assignment, which is just putting a word in a book, and material participation, which is the actual human act of understanding each other.
Words matter immensely, but they don't matter magically. They only matter because human beings materialize them through usage.
Okay, this feels like a massive paradigm shift. If words are just provisional tools and meaning arrives regardless of official permission, and we know we have the inferential engines to understand it, why do we still act this way?
It is the big question.
Why is it our default setting to rush to the dictionary or the HR manual or the standard operating procedure to invalidate other people? Why do we love the map more than the terrain?
This is where we have to shift from looking at the language itself to looking at the legacy operating system of the human mind. Because the behavior you're describing isn't really about linguistics at all. It is about biology and psychology.
Okay.
We have to use a process of linear reality deduction to decode what is actually happening in the brain.
Linear reality deduction, meaning we track the cause and effect step by step without jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. If we know that we can infer meaning, but we deliberately choose to grab the dictionary instead, then we are using the dictionary as a psychological shield.
A shield.
Institutional approval becomes a substitute for interpretive courage.
Interpretive courage. That implies that trying to understand someone actually requires bravery. Why would understanding a coined word require bravery?
Because to truly understand an emerging novel thought from another human being requires you to step outside of your known cataloged reality. You have to leave the safety of the map.
And the architect text gives us a linear deduction of exactly how our biology reacts to that departure.
It treats the unknown as a literal threat.
Yes, our brains evolved to keep us alive, not to make us brilliant linguists.
Right. When we encounter something unfamiliar, whether it is a foreign custom on the street, a strange shadow in the woods, an uncatalogued word in a sentence, or even an idea that challenges our political worldview, the body's legacy operating system perceives it as a threat.
The amygdala fires?
Discomfort spikes. The mind immediately tries to move attention away to something safer, something known.
So let's trace that linear chain. Step one, I'm reading an article and I encounter an unfamiliar word or a bizarrely structured concept.
Okay, step one is the encounter.
Step two, that unfamiliarity doesn't just puzzle me. It triggers a subtle biological threat response. I feel a flash of discomfort.
Right. And then step three. The mind desperately needs an escape hatch to alleviate that discomfort. It wants to resolve the tension as quickly as possible without expending the energy of deep inference.
And step four, the mind grabs the closest socially acceptable shield. It grabs the dictionary, it grabs the rules.
By hiding behind the rules, the listener avoids the profound vulnerability of meeting an emerging thought halfway.
It masks a deep insecurity about one's own interpretive power.
Think about it. A reader who is uncertain of their own ability to navigate the unknown reaches for sanctioned inventory, as though we're the sole court of appeal.
It is emotionally much safer to say, the rule book says you are wrong, than to say, I am struggling to understand the new concept you are trying to build. Can you help me?
So the person screaming, that is not a word, isn't actually a strict academic. They're just scared. They're using the dictionary as a panic room.
A panic room. Wow. That is brilliant.
It reveals a fundamental flaw in how they are positioning themselves in reality. And this brings us to one of the most structural concepts in the architect text, the configurations of identity.
Okay, yes. Specifically, the difference between what the author calls responsive one variable, or R1V, and autonomous variable one, or AV1.
We need to spend some real time on this because when I read this section, I started seeing these two configurations in every aspect of my life.
At work, in my relationships, everywhere. Let's break down R1V first. Responsive one variable. What does that look like in a person?
In the R1V configuration, your identity acts like a weather vane.
Okay, a weather vane.
The one which represents the core of who you are, your central variable is totally reactive. You do not generate your own weather.
You just spin to whatever direction the wind blows.
You are constantly scanning the room, scanning the culture, scanning the official rules, adjusting yourself to fit them.
So if I am an R1V person at a dinner party, I am trying to figure out what everyone else thinks is cool or appropriate before I speak. I am letting the external variables dictate my shape.
Precisely. You are the variable adapting to every room.
Okay.
Now contrast that with the AV1 configuration, autonomous variable 1. In this state, you are internally anchored.
Internally anchoring.
The external variables, the opinions of the dinner party, the chaos of the economy, the shifting rules of society, they still exist. They still shift and change, but they do not define your core.
You define how you meet the room.
You bring a stable, autonomous principle into the chaos.
So if we bring this back to language and to the person who refuses to understand a coined word because it is not in the dictionary, well, that person is operating entirely in R1V mode, aren't they?
Completely. They are letting an external variable, a physical book published by strangers decades ago, dictate what doors of meaning they are allowed to walk through today.
They have outsourced their cognitive agency to a physical object.
They are trapped in a responsive state, reacting to the absence of a rule rather than responding to the presence of a living human being.
They have made the dictionary the autonomous anchor and reduced themselves to the reactive variable.
Which is the exact opposite of how meaning is actually made. To become an AV1 meaning maker, you must take radical responsibility for your choices.
You have to step up and say, I am the architect of my own meaning.
You shift from procedural policing to active creation. You stop waiting for a committee to tell you what is real, what is valid, what is allowed to be thought.
You realize that meaning isn't a hidden treasure you find buried in a reference book. It is a building you design on the fly, using your experiences, your inferences, and your willingness to connect.
That is the essence of AV1. It is the embrace of agency.
But practically speaking, how do I do that?
It is the hard part, right?
Let's say I want to step into that AV1 autonomy. I am dropping the dictionary shield. I am standing in the void of an unknown conversation. Someone is throwing bizarre concepts at me, and I am feeling that biological threat response.
The panic room instinct.
Exactly. How do I systematically process it without panicking? The architect text throws a formula at us for this, and I am going to be honest. When I saw math in a manifesto about consciousness, My brain kind of shut down.
You're talking about the pseudo-algebraic concept mapping system. A over B, circle plus C over D.
Yes, A over B, circle plus C over D. Please explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old who is very bad at math because it looks intimidating on the page.
I promise you, it is not math for the sake of calculation. There are no numbers to crunch here.
Oh, thank goodness.
It is a visual, elegant architecture for seeing relationships that are usually invisible. It is a tool to slow your brain down when the amygdala fires. Let's break the symbols down so they become a tool you can actually hold in your hand.
Okay, let's take it piece by piece.
The formula has two sides, joined by that circle plus in the middle. Let's look at the left side first, A over B. A is an iterator.
An iterator.
Think of an iterator as raw energy, raw content, or the initial spark of an action. Think of A like water exploding out of a fire hose.
Yeah.
It has massive force, but no shape.
Okay, iterator A is raw water from a hose, just chaotic energy.
The forward slash under it means filtered by or shaped by or constrained by, and the B beneath it is a delineator.
A delineator.
The delineator is the context, the rules, the filter. If A is the water, B is the brass nozzle you screw onto the end of the hose.
Ah, I see.
The nozzle shapes that raw energy into a precise spray or a direct stream.
That makes perfect sense. So
Yeah.
A over B is just raw energy. A taking shape by passing through a filter. B.
Exactly. Now, the right side of the equation is C over D. It is the exact same relationship, just with different elements. C is another iterator, more raw energy being shaped by D, another delineator.
And the symbol in the middle, the plus sign inside a circle.
That is the symbol for integration or synthesis. It means you don't just add them together like apples and oranges.
You integrate them to create a completely new, holistic understanding.
Okay, so let's take this out of the abstract. Let's build a custom equation specifically for what we've been talking about today.
Let's do it. Let's say I am reading a text message from my teenage niece. She uses some completely wild Gen Z slang I have never seen before.
Perfect scenario.
Like she says something is chuji or riz or whatever the new word is this week. My initial R1V reaction is to be annoyed and say, speak English.
The panic room response.
But I want to be an AV1 meaning maker. I apply the formula. What is iterator A?
Iterator A is your internal state. It is your raw curiosity. Instead of annoyance, you deploy curiosity. But raw curiosity isn't enough. It needs to be shaped. So it is filtered by delineator B, which is the syntax of her text message.
So the left side of the equation is curiosity over syntax. My raw curiosity about what she means, shaped by observing how she placed the word in the sentence. Oh, she used it as a verb.
Right. You've now formed a structured question in your mind. Now we move to the right side of the equation. You integrate that with iterator C, which is the niece's raw intention.
Her intention.
Why is she texting you? What is the wrong energy she's trying to convey?
Excitement. Frustration. Maybe she is asking for money.
Exactly. And that intention, C, is filtered by delineator D, which is the context.
Context.
What is happening around the text message? Did she just get out of a difficult exam? Is she talking about a movie?
So the full custom equation for this moment is curiosity over syntax, circle plus, intention over context.
Yes. When you encounter the unknown word, you don't panic. You apply the formula. Your curiosity is channeled by the syntax. You integrate that insight with your sense of her intention, which is being narrowed by the context of her day.
It is like triangulating a signal. I am pulling data from the structure, from her motivation, and from the environment, and integrating it all to decode the slang without ever needing to look it up on Urban Dictionary.
By looking at communication through this equation, you reclaim what the text calls the metamind. You step back.
You become the audience in the grand theater of your head.
You can observe the actors, the words, the context, the intentions, and you piece together the plot without needing someone to hand you a pre-written script. You're doing the math of meaning in real time.
It changes everything from a passive consumption of rules to an active creative synthesis. It makes you an active participant in reality.
And this is where the stakes of all this become incredibly high. Because there is a dark side to this choice. What happens if we utterly refuse to do this math?
What happens if we refuse to be AV1 meaning makers and we violently cling to our official lexicons, our rigid blueprints, and our inherited rules?
The architect text actually scales this up. It takes this cognitive failure, this refusal to adapt, and applies it to geopolitical history.
It provides a very sobering analysis of how clinging to a rigid blueprint isn't just a personal failing. At scale, it is a catastrophic strategic liability. And it uses a very stark historical example to illustrate what it calls the fatal flaw of supremacy in thought.
The text analyzes the strategic failure of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime during World War II. And to be clear for you listening, the text approaches this strictly as an anatomy of perceptual error and cognitive rigidity.
It dissects how the ideology of supremacy creates a massive blind spot that guarantees destruction.
The author argues that their strategy was fundamentally self-defeating because it was built on three existential delusions.
Right. First, the myth of divine infallibility. This was the belief that their rigid, preconceived worldview was perfectly, unassailably correct.
When you believe your math is flawless, you ignore the terrain. This led them to ignore brutal logistical realities, such as the impossibility of the winter invasion of Russia.
The map said they would win, so they ignored the reality of the snow and the supply lines.
Second, the fiction of enemy inferiority. Because their ideology demanded that they view their adversaries as subhuman or weak, they completely blinded themselves to the actual industrial, technological, and mobilization capabilities of the Soviet Union and the United States.
They couldn't perceive the threat because their conceptual blueprint didn't allow the threat to exist.
And that leads to the third delusion, the illusion of unilateral control, the absolute refusal to engage in what the text terms empathetic research.
Empathetic research. Empathy in this strategic context isn't about sympathy or kindness, is it?
No, it is a tactical necessity. It is about recognizing the humanity, the creativity, and the capacity for adaptation in others.
Because the ideology demanded a belief in their own absolute supremacy, they could not study or learn from their adversaries. They could not adapt.
They couldn't look at an unknown tactic and try to infer its purpose. They just dismissed it as inferior until it crushed them.
And in a dynamic, shifting world, the absolute refusal to adapt to emerging realities guarantees your own destruction.
The author states clearly, supremacy, whether based on race, ideology, or any other form of bias, blinds individuals and organizations to the true nature of their challenges and opportunities.
When you operate from a myth of infallibility, refusing to confront uncomfortable facts, the result is catastrophic failure.
Now, if we take that massive, devastating historical example and scale it back down to the core of our deep dive today to language.pdf and the tyranny of the dictionary, we see the exact same cognitive error occurring on a micro level in our daily lives.
It is the exact same structure of error. The text calls it lexical inhumanity.
Lexical inhumanity, that is a heavy phrase.
When we treat the absence of prior registration in a dictionary as grounds for erasing the reality of someone's attempt to communicate, we are suffering from a localized, interpersonal form of supremacy.
We are assuming that our rigid, inherited blueprint of the language is inherently superior to the living, breathing human being standing in front of us, trying to express a novel thought.
We are operating under the myth of our own linguistic infallibility and the fiction of their communicative inferiority.
We are demanding that their complex, messy, emerging reality conform exactly to our outdated map, rather than doing the work to update our map to reflect their reality.
We are reducing human communication to compliance. We are looking at another person and essentially saying, speak exactly my way using only my approved units, or your thoughts do not exist to me.
That is a terrifyingly arrogant way to move through the world. It is an intellectual dead end.
It wages war against the fabric of reality itself because reality is always shifting.
True strength. The text argues whether in global geopolitical strategy, in scientific discovery, or in a simple, difficult conversation across a kitchen table comes from adaptation, from empathetic research, and from the profound willingness to meet an emerging thought halfway.
To put the dictionary down, to look the person in the eye and say, I don't recognize those exact words, but I see the structure you were trying to build. Let's build it together.
That is the ultimate act of the architect. It is the realization that meaning is a shared construction project, not a solo compliance audit.
I think we need to take a breath and just recap the incredible arc of this journey, because we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started with a simple map, and we rescued language from the tyranny of the dictionary.
We learned that the target of language is connection, not obedience.
We saw that dimensional homonymy, looking at context and syntax, gives us the power to infer almost anything.
We applied the wise parent test to our own reactions, realizing that crying that is not a word is often just an excuse to avoid the caloric effort of empathy.
We explored nounships, seeing words as provisional architectures rather than magical sovereign entities.
We decoded our own biology, understanding how the dictionary acts as a psychological shield, a panic room, to protect our R1V identities from the threat of the unknown.
And we learned how to use the A over B circle plus C over D equation, to step into AV1 autonomy, becoming active meaning makers.
Finally, we saw the fatal blinding flaw of supremacy and the necessity of adaptation.
If there is a vital takeaway from this entire stack of sources, it is to remember that you are the architect of your reality. The legacy operating system of your mind will always try to default to the safety of official recognition.
It will always reach for the shield. It will always want to be told what to think.
But you have the admin password. You can choose to be the AV1 presence in the room. You can choose to interpret, to infer, and to connect.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today, something to mull over on your own as you go about your week.
We have talked a lot about the courage it takes to understand others, the interpretive courage to drop the shield, but what about the courage to express yourself?
The next time you feel the urge to correct someone's language, or the next time you instinctively reject a new idea because the terminology used wasn't proper, pause.
Apply the wise parent test. Ask yourself, are you truly defending the integrity of the language, or are you just terrified of the vulnerability required to truly understand another human being?
And conversely, turn that lens inward. How many of your own brilliant emerging thoughts, how many of your own profound feelings have you silenced or diluted because you couldn't find the official words to express them?
If the map doesn't exist, you have the right and the capacity to draw it yourself.
Exactly. We started this deep dive talking about maps, how we expect them to be these binary absolute authorities that tell us where it is safe to step.
But maybe the best navigators aren't the ones who just memorize the map. Maybe the best navigators are the ones who aren't afraid to drive off the edge of it, into the unknown, knowing they have the tools to build the road as they go.
Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored journey. Keep building your own meaning, and we will see you on the next deep dive.